What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back on the video. Today we're talking about the best draft strategy you can implement with a late first round pick this season. I'll go over 3 different builds you can start off with, that way you're prepared no matter what value you face at the end of round 1. So at the end of round 1, you're probably going to be looking at Stefon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Devonta Adams, Garrett Wilson at wide receiver, and then some combination of Chubb, Saquon, and Jonathan Taylor at running back. Kelsey, very likely off the board, and then we're not considering a quarterback with either our late first round pick or our early second round pick. So my advice would just generally be draft a top player in whatever rankings you're using. If you're using my rankings, your own rankings you created, someone else's rankings, doesn't really matter. Whoever the top player is, trust that, go with that, draft the top player. One bit of strategy that does come into play here is, well, we're at the turn. And so if we assume that we're in a 12-team league, and let's say we're at the number 10 pick, there are only going to be 4 picks that go by between that pick and our next one. It's going to be 11, 12, and then the turn's going to happen. 13, 14, we're going to be there again at pick 15. And so what we do want to do is play the ADP game. That is simply when we look at each player's ADP and we try to get the 2 best players that we can. So for example, let's say we're drafting from the number 10 pick, and let's say you have Nick Chubb ranked right ahead of Stefon Diggs, but you know that Stefon Diggs has an ADP of 9 and Chubb has an ADP of 15. Well, there's almost no way that Stefon Diggs will end up being there at pick 15. But if his ADP is, 15th, Chubb has what, like a 55-60% chance, maybe even a little bit higher, of being there at pick 15. So instead of just saying, well, I'm going to take the top ranked player and taking Nick Chubb, knowing you're not going to get Diggs in round 2, well, why not take the top ranked player that you know will not be there at your next pick? And that's the benefit of having an early or late first round pick, is you're kind of like more easily able to do that, because it's not always going to be successful, but it's a lot easier to be successful doing that if, there's only 4 picks between that one and your next one. You can be a lot more accurate in saying, who do I think is going to be there? Whereas if you always have, the number 6 pick in the draft, there are a lot of picks that go by between your pick and the next one every time. Now, there's going to be a lot that go by between our second and our third round pick, but I think my biggest bit of advice is take the top ranked player you know will not be there at the next pick. So even if you have to reach 1, maybe 2 spots in the rankings to secure that player, if you know that the people you're reaching over to take that player are going to be there after the turn in round 2, it's probably a good idea to, again, play the ADP game and take the player that you know won't be there next. So knowing that, here are 3 potential starts that you can make with a late first round pick. Team 1 is drafting from the number 10 pick. They're going to do Diggs and then Nick Chubb. Team number 2 is drafting from the 11 pick. They're going to take Saquon and Garrett Wilson. And then team number 3 is drafting from the 12 pick. They're going to take CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown. The third round is where I believe the negative impact of having a late first round pick is most felt, because you can't really tell that much once you get into the later rounds. Value is all kind of jumbled at that point, but it's really felt in the late third. People ask me all the time, where is the best spot to draft from this season? And my answer this season is like the early first round, I think, since you do lock up just a truly elite player, but also you are guaranteeing you're getting 2 studs in rounds 2 and in round 3. With a late first round pick, you are getting 2 phenomenal players in the 1-2 term, but you're not getting, top 5 player. But then really, there's a drop off in round 3, at least in my eyes. I think 29. I think there's 29. We can call them tier 1 players this season. If you look at different sets of rankings, you're going to see, depending on how many tiers people make, different number of tiers there. But I would say there's 29 truly elite players this season. And so when you have a late first round pick in a 12-team league, which is what we're kind of simulating in this video, you're picking between 34 and 36. And so sometimes when you have picks, 30, 31, 32, one of the top 29 players can fall to you. But at 34 to 36, it's much less likely that happens. And so it just hurts a little bit kind of being one of the first to be drafting from the second tier of players. And that is why I'm a pretty big advocate for Mark Andrews in the late third round. If you can get him, I have him ranked 26th in half PPR leagues. And so I would even be comfortable taking him in the mid third round. But I love him in the late third round because, it's even more unlikely that you get an amazing value at running back, at wide receiver. You likely just missed out on Mahomes, Allen, Jalen Hurts, and you'd prefer to not immediately start taking that next tier of quarterback because that's definitely a worse value than the people who just got them, in the mid third round. And so you're in a range where you have to make two picks pretty close to each other, but you just missed out on that last top tier of players. And so our team from the number 10 pick that went Diggs and then Nick Chubb, they're going to take Mark Andrews. I'm going to simulate that team, just saying that Mark Andrews fell to this spot and we're going to take him there. We're going to draft the other two teams operating under the assumption that Mark Andrews was not available. Again, if he were available, I would take him on all three teams here. So the other two picks, honestly, I don't love running back at the end of round 3. Maybe Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Stevenson, maybe one of those three falls to at the end of the third round. I would definitely draft one of them. I would say that's unlikely. I don't really think that's going to happen. And so you do kind of see a pretty big drop off from those three into this next grouping of running backs. And it never feels fantastic drafting, the first player in that kind of new tier. And so if you're not going with Mark Andrews, I would suggest drafting a wide receiver in the late third round and really just taking your favorite that is still available. I'm going to take Deebo Samuel on our two example teams. So we've got Diggs, Chubb, Andrews from pick 10, Saquon, Garrett Wilson, Deebo from pick 11, and then CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, and Deebo Samuel from pick 12. That gives us one tight end early start, one hero RB start, and then one team that's starting off RB0 but will not finish that way. Again, my criteria if you're going to do an RB0 build is that you're either in a full PPR league, this example is half PPR, or you're in a league, and ideally or you're in a league where you can start at least 4 wide receivers. I'm going to simulate this under a normal build that is 2 wide receivers. In round 4, we're starting to think a lot more about how our team looks when making every single pick. Our tight end early team is obviously not going to draft a tight end. We went running back, wide receiver, then tight end. And so in the early 4th round, we're going to take whatever running back value is available in that spot if it's available. And if not, we're just going to lean towards wide receiver. On the hero RB start, we're kind of doing the same. And then the RB0 start, honestly, we're almost forced into taking just basically the top running back. And that's kind of the danger of starting off with 3 wide receivers under a format where you definitely do not want to go RB0. We could technically draft a 4th wide receiver, and we can do that if there's an amazing value. If you get to that pick at the turn and you're like, I know I started off with 3 wide receivers, but this is a wide receiver that usually goes in the early 3rd round, and you just have no clue how they're still available in this 4th round pick, sure, do it and then just hammer the running back position after that and just avoid wide receiver for a very long time. But ideally, you don't do that, right? You don't start drafting your bench before running back, quarterback, and tight end, right? That's now 3 positions that you are avoiding drafting so that you can have a really strong player on your bench. That's not fantastic. It's fine to do, and you're going to see we actually kind of do it in our hero RB team, but that's because we're not avoiding it for 3 positions. We're only saying, okay, I think, I can maybe double dip a tight end late. I think maybe I can find a quarterback late, but we're not also saying those 2 things and saying I'm also going to avoid the running back position. It's just too much if you're pushing all 3 off. So we definitely want to lean towards running back in that build. So we're going to take Gibbs on the tight end early team and the 3 wide receiver team, and we're going to take Amari Cooper on the hero RB build. In round 5, we had been taking Justin Herbert in the last 2 videos. We went over strategy from an early and a mid first round pick. It's a little bit less likely he's available in this one because we have a late 5th round pick. And so we're going to wait a little bit longer in this video for quarterback. On the tight end early team, our lean is absolutely wide receiver. We only have 1 through 4 rounds. And then the other 2, our lean is definitely towards the running back position. Each of these teams only has one running back, and we do know that ideally you want to leave round 5 with 2 running backs, and then again, it's the opposite on that first team where we only have 1 wide receiver. We would ideally like to leave round 5 with 2 wide receivers, so really just like evening out these teams is what we would ideally like to do. But I'm going to show you one build that isn't able to grab that second running back. So we're going to take a 4th wide receiver on the hero RB start, basically just simulating like you started off hero RB, you're comfortable avoiding the running back position, but then, wide receiver just keeps becoming a value. Maybe people are being really aggressive early with running back, just to show you how your team would end up if you had to avoid running back a little bit longer than you initially planned. So through round 5, the teams are going to be at pick 10, Diggs, Chubb, Andrews, Gibbs, and Mike Williams. From pick 11, Saquon, Garrett Wilson, Debo, Amari Cooper, and Mike Williams. And then from pick 12, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Debo Samuel, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Dameon Pierce. In round 6, again, remember, we didn't go with Justin Herbert in any of these builds. And I think if you miss out on the top tier quarterback, you miss out on Herbert. I think Trevor Lawrence is a really, really good quarterback to attack. He made fantastic strides going from year 1 into year 2. I think he can have a true breakout season in year 3. We also know that quarterback early, quarterback middle has been very successful in recent years. And we're going to have to compete with the teams that have Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, Fields, Herbert. There are 7 really, really, really good top tier quarterbacks this season. And I think that if you're avoiding that range, you basically have to take someone you think can enter that range, right? That can outproduce their ADP and can compete with those quarterbacks. I think that Trevor Lawrence has the best chance of doing that. And so I really like drafting him after that range is over. Unfortunately, and I think this is a great example of, why it can hurt you to go too heavy into one position. I think our team that only has 1 running back through round 5 needs help at running back, right? I think that team can be really hurt if in round 6 we go with Trevor Lawrence and we risk not even getting, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, maybe not even getting running back in round 7. I think we're putting too much weight basically on Saquon and asking him to do too much on that team, to where I think we really do need to go with another running back at that spot. So I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence on the other 2 teams, and then I'm going to have that team take their second running back in Cam Akers. Then for the rest of the draft, it's really just about evening out the roster. Take notice of where you spent the most draft capital, not necessarily being like, oh, I have 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers. Well, where did you take them? Did you start off with those 3 running backs and then 3 wide receivers? And so you have way more draft capital spent at the running back position. Just try and even out draft capital. So if you spent a lot early at running back, let's say, well, maybe you want to end up with more total wide receivers. And then the flip side, you started off with a lot of wide receivers. Well, maybe you want to end up with more total running backs. Just take notice of where you spent that draft capital, even everything out. So I'm going to show you how I finished each of these builds on the screen now. But for those of you listening on Spotify, Team 1 from pick 10 has Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, Chubb, Gibbs, Javonte Williams, and Khalil Herbert at running back, Diggs, Mike Williams, JSN, Elijah Moore, Sky Moore at wide receiver, and then Mark Andrews at tight end. And honestly, I think this was my favorite among these 3. Team 2, pick 11, that has Geno Smith at quarterback. So that one had to wait a little bit longer, remember, because we drafted Saquon, but then we had a ton of wide receivers in a row, and we kind of had to go back to running back. So again, Geno at quarterback, Saquon, Cam Akers, Dave Montgomery, Khalil Herbert at running back, Garrett Wilson, Debo, Amari Cooper, Mike Williams, Dotson, and Sky Moore wide receiver, and then no tight end yet. And so this is a team where I would suggest double dipping late at the tight end position, since we know that if you don't take a tight end early or middle, it is optimal to take 2 of them late. And then I'd also suggest taking a second quarterback late, especially this team is so dominant at wide receiver. You don't really need to spend late round picks on wide receiver. And so in the later rounds, I grab a backup quarterback, I grab 2 tight ends, and I probably just spend the rest of the picks at running back. Then team 3, pick 12, has Trevor Lawrence quarterback, Gibbs, Pierce, Montgomery, and Khalil Herbert at running back, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Deebo Samuel, Elijah Moore, Sky Moore at wide receiver, and then Darren Waller at tight end. I think if I took Waller, I probably would not take a backup tight end. So those are 3 teams that you could draft with a late first round pick. I'll show on the screen now all the teams we've drafted as part of this 3-week series. I'll keep it up for a little bit so you don't have to like pause the video or anything. I'm also going to post this image for free on my website in case you want to download it to your computer, to your phone, whatever. Just have that as a reference at any point. I want to reiterate that this series is much, much more about strategy overall than it was specific players. My rankings will be constantly updated for the latest news, and so I'm going to have differing takes on players as we progress through the summer, and especially as ADPs change, value is going to change as well. But overall strategy, the strategy we talked about in these videos, that's not really going to change as much, right? The structure of these teams won't change as much as the players could as we get reports throughout camp and things like that changing ADP. So again, you can download this image on my website for free if you want it. I'll have it under like the draft content tab on the site. And if you want to see, any more of my draft strategy content, player rankings, projections, team grade calculator, league winners data, machine learning models, trade calculator, all that stuff and more, you can find that on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. And if you want to keep seeing all my free content, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel or on Spotify. I'll have a video posted every single day from now until week 1. Then, my friends, isn't this one? Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.